Part 26. I Can See the Laws of Things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 251. The world is freezing cold. But before they could be surprised, they saw the figure that people feared on the ice sculpture formed by the frozen sea. Lin En. In the whistling wind, Lin En stepped on the huge waves. Looking down at the largest port city in the kingdom of the rising sun, he said slowly, I will give you one last chance. If you surrender and submit now, you can still live. If you continue to resist, then. Lin En raised his hand and said, I will let half of your country's territory be submerged. In an instant, everyone fell into great fear. They raised their heads and looked at the figure on the huge waves. This fear, accompanied by the despair caused by the huge gap in strength, instantly swept through the hearts of all of them. All the strong men looked at their backbones, Amaterasu and Zosu, with trembling eyes. Amaterasu stared at Lin En standing on the huge waves, her eyes full of anger and scrutiny. She was the goddess of the nation who had rebuilt the kingdom of the rising sun on this wasteland when the spiritual energy was revived. Although she didn't know what happened, and didn't know when such a powerful existence appeared in this world, she couldn't help but be angry under the premise that the entire country was threatened. Amaterasu raised her head and said deeply, I am the supreme ruler of the kingdom of the rising sun. I want to know who you are and what kind of hatred you have with our kingdom of the rising sun. Lin En looked down at her and said, Don't you know? Amaterasu said deeply, I have been in seclusion for 18 years and don't know much about the current world situation. Lin En hugged his shoulders and said, I can give you 5 minutes, you can ask your people yourself. Amaterasu turned her head and stared at the dozen or so town generals around her with scrutiny. The dozen or so town generals looked at each other. Those who can reach this level naturally have a very high status in the kingdom of the rising sun. When they made decisions, they originally thought that the world's countries together to divide the Kyushu region, although there are risks, will definitely not be too big. But who could have thought that Lin En's return would directly turn this decision into a disaster for the entire rising sun country? The dozen or so town generals lowered their heads and fell into silence. After a moment, they told Amaterasu and Zosu everything that had happened. A few minutes later, Amaterasu stared at them with great anger, her eyes wishing to eat them up. Such a big thing, you have been hiding it from the two of us. If we hadn't sensed the energy fluctuations here today, our rising sun country would have been destroyed in your hands. Above the huge waves, Lin En looked down and said, 5 minutes have passed. I wonder what the result of your discussion is. Amaterasu and Zosu raised their heads and looked at Lin En in the sky, their eyes were extremely complicated. They were not aware of the interference action against the Kyushu territory. And now, they can clearly feel that Lin En's strength is far stronger than the two of them. If they really want to fight to the death, the entire rising sun country may be destroyed. The two gritted their teeth, their eyes flickered. But surrender is a shame for them. As world-class magic gods, they may really accept it so easily. But they know that they have no choice. After a long time, Amaterasu raised her head and gritted her teeth and said, I can surrender to you on behalf of the kingdom of the rising sun, but I have a condition. Just as he finished speaking, Lin En's voice like thunder came. You are not qualified to negotiate with me. Either surrender unconditionally or I will kill you to surrender. You only have these 2 ways to go. Lin En's voice was very cold and very firm. Because he is now in control of the initiative, the kingdom of the rising sun has no capital to negotiate conditions. The top combat forces of the kingdom of the rising sun around all felt a wave of humiliation. But they also knew that they had no ability to negotiate any conditions now. Amaterasu gritted her teeth and stared at Lin En in the sky. She was very unwilling, but she knew that no matter how unwilling she was, it would be useless in the face of real strength. Okay, Amaterasu gritted her teeth and said, the kingdom of the rising sun is willing to submit to you unconditionally, but we will only submit to you, not to the Kyushu region. Lin En hugged his shoulders and said lightly, "Very good, in this case, I think you can now inform your Supreme Council." Amaterasu turned around, looked at everyone present, and shouted, "Contact the Supreme Council immediately and tell them that the Kingdom of the Rising Sun has now declared its surrender, and let them inform the whole country." Yes, the top combat forces around looked humiliated, but still acted immediately. Just a few minutes later, they contacted the Supreme Council. But soon, they got a message that was beyond their expectations. "What?" Amaterasu's face changed drastically, and said, "Say it again." The town general raised his head tremblingly and said, "The Supreme Council has sent a message that they refuse to accept your order. They said that the Kingdom of the Rising Sun is a sacred country and will never surrender to any individual or country. The Supreme Council has issued a supreme notice to the two of you, requiring you to fight to the death with us. The highest power belongs to the Supreme Council. You two have no right to decide the future of the Kingdom of the Rising Sun. And they have already contacted the British Empire. The Kingdom of the Rising Sun will jointly resist the invasion of Kyushu with the British Empire." As soon as these words came out, Amaterasu and Zosu's faces turned pale instantly. They never expected that the Supreme Council would disobey their orders at this critical juncture. It seems that the seclusion of more than 10 years has caused the Supreme Council that they set up with their own hands to deteriorate. They have long lost control of the Supreme Council. But. Amaterasu and Zosu suddenly turned their heads and looked at Lin En, whose expression was gradually indifferent on the huge waves. Their faces became even paler. Don't they understand yet? Now it's the brink of the demise of their Kingdom of the Rising Sun. What can the Kingdom of the Rising Sun use to fight against those who can't even resist them? Take your head. The next moment, Lin En raised his head and looked to the north, his eyes cold and indifferent. "It seems that you will not cry until you see the coffin." As soon as these words came out, Tianzhao and Zhuoxu instantly felt the murderous intent bursting out of Lin En's eyes. They knew that Lin En had the intention to kill. Even the frozen waves had already shown signs of thawing. They were shocked and immediately knelt on one knee, trembling. "Lin En, the Supreme Council can be handed over to us to solve. Their decision does not represent the will of the Kingdom of the Rising Sun." Lin En suddenly raised his head and said, "I don't have that much patience, nor do I have that much time. Since they don't know what's good for them, then I have nothing to say." In an instant, under their horrified gaze, Lin En stretched out his hand and tore the space directly. Amaterasu and Zhuoxu were both very anxious. They knew where Lin En was going to tear the space, which was their capital. "Do you know that you are pushing our Kingdom of the Rising Sun to the road of death?" Amaterasu and Zhuoxu immediately tore the space eagerly and headed for the capital. They must stop all this from happening, otherwise, the Kingdom of the Rising Sun may be destroyed. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 252. The Land of the Rising Sun, the Eastern Capital. The Eastern Capital is the largest city in the Land of the Rising Sun. In fact, Dongdu has been the capital of their nation since 1,000 years ago, but when the spiritual energy revived 100 years ago, the city was destroyed in the turmoil. It was not until more than 10 years after the end of the world's great changes that they rebuilt this metropolis on the ruins. At this moment, in the very center of Dongdu, stood a towering building. All members of the Supreme Council of the Land of the Rising Sun were sitting. At the top of the table, sat a middle-aged man with gray hair, his eyes were sinister and his expression was cold. Although he did not deliberately emit any fluctuations in power, it could be seen just from his aura. He is a world-class strongman. His name is Warring States. He is one of the 3 world-class powerhouses in the Land of the Rising Sun. At the same time, he is also the leader of the Supreme Council. During the more than 10 years when Amaterasu and Zhuoxu were in seclusion, he was the supreme ruler of the Kingdom of the Rising Sun in a practical sense. He is known as the Warring States period, and is a true hawk in the land of the rising sun. Amaterasu and Xuanhuan, those two weak losers, warring states looked at the people sitting gloomily and said, "As one of the supreme rulers of our country of the rising sun, he actually surrendered to other countries. We in the country of the rising sun don't have cowards like them." Senguo's eyes were furious, and his anger almost burst out. Under his rule, the kingdom of the rising sun stood proudly in this world for decades. How could he let Amaterasu and Xuanhuan do such a thing that humiliated the country and the people on his behalf? He stood up instantly and said with a cold look, "I think that Lin En will launch an attack on us as soon as he receives the news, and immediately send an order to get everyone ready for battle." Yes. Members of the House of Representatives simply did not dare disobey his orders. In the past 10 years, the kingdom of the rising sun has been a parliamentary system in name, but everyone knows that the warring states period is the dictator of their kingdom of the rising sun. Their hearts trembled. Because of the huge wave that swallowed the sky in the south before, even if they were standing here, they could fully feel its terrifying power. Amaterasu and Xuanhuan's defense must have declared failure before they chose to surrender to Lin En. In fact, all of this has shown that Lin En's strength has reached a level beyond their imagination. Are they really going to use all the strength of the country to fight Lin En to the death? Finally, a member of Congress couldn't help but stood up, trembling, and said, "Sir Sengoku, I am not questioning your decision, but I still want to ask, do we really have enough strength to fight that Lin? We have received reliable news that the British Empire's expeditionary force was completely wiped out by Lin En on his own before they even landed in the Kyushu territory. And Lord Haijal, the world-class powerhouse of the British Empire, was tortured to pieces by Lin En. I'm not questioning you, Lord Sengoku. Do you and us really have the ability to defeat him alone?" They were terrified. His words spoke to the sentiments of all the MPs present. No one is afraid of death, and so are they. If surrendering can bring them a chance to survive, they may really choose to surrender. Warring states looked at them indifferently and said, "Don't say it's us. In this world, if any world-class strong man alone confronts that Lin En, they will definitely lose. Because from the beginning to the end, that Lin En didn't use the kind of Honkai ability that he used when he crushed the 3 world-class powerhouses in the Kyushu region a few months ago. But this doesn't mean we can't kill him." Everyone present was afraid to express their anger, with fear in their eyes. They all knew that Senguo was a very conceited person. In this world, they never take anyone seriously, even Zosu and Amaterasu, who are both world-class powerhouses, or the supreme ruler of the distant British Empire. He treats them all equally. And now, warring states actually made such comments about Lin En. This made them extremely frightened. Although warring states was arrogant, he was able to reach a world-class position and become the supreme ruler of a country. Naturally, he would not be blinded by his arrogance. Immediately after Lin En killed the 3 world-class experts, he had already obtained the top-secret video of the battlefield that was secretly filmed that day through secret channels. When Lin En's Honkai Eye appeared, he understood immediately. If he had a fight with Lin, he would have absolutely no chance of winning. That kind of destructive power made him tremble even now. However, fear definitely does not mean that he will surrender. If they could really kill Lin, maybe they could get a glimpse of the origin of the collapse power from his corpse. Warring States suddenly turned his head and said, "I have reached an agreement with the great Emperor of Britain." When he was on that Lin expedition, he had already led several world-class experts from the British Empire to the high seas to make arrangements. This will be an unprecedented hunting operation. As soon as these words came out, everyone's eyes showed fear. Hunt. Hunt Lin. This news shocked their hearts. The strong men of the British Empire have already been dispatched, but look at the expression of the warring states period. They know. Obviously, the world-class strongmen participating in this operation are definitely not just the British Empire. But if that Lin En really used the power of the collapse that day? A member of parliament said in fear. Zhang Guo said indifferently, he won't have that opportunity, because on the high seas, what awaits him will be a world-class killing game. Do you know the fate of the former sea overlord, the sky-devouring beast, 80 years ago? As soon as these words came out, everyone instantly showed great fear. In an instant, they understood everything. Most of them have experienced the era that revived it. And what they remember most about that era is the scene 80 years ago when all the human strongmen in the world gathered their strength to fight against the last world-class beast in the world at that time. Sky-devouring beast, the king of the high seas. In that era, it ranked first among the top 10 world-class beasts, occupying the center of the high seas, invincible in the world. After the strongmen from various countries sealed and killed the 10 world-class strongmen one by one, at least hundreds of world-class strongmen went to the high seas to participate in the largest hunting operation in history. The final result was that most of the hundreds of world-class strongmen were lost, but the sky-devouring beast was finally destroyed, and humans once again stood at the top. But no one knows how they killed the world-class beast. Because even a national-level beast requires at least several world-class strongmen to barely fight it. A world-class beast is even more invincible. Not to mention, it was the sky-devouring beast that ranked first at the time. Back then, most of the people who experienced that hunting activity had died. But Zhang Guo was one of them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 253. Zhang Guo raised his head and said deeply, back then, we, 100 world-class strong men, joined forces to forge a huge killing array spanning the entire sea in the center of that sea. That killing array was born from the sea. As long as the sea does not disappear, it cannot be destroyed. Moreover, it can continuously absorb the power of the creatures controlled by it and continuously replenish itself. We used this killing array to kill that world-class beast. And Kaidi of Britain was one of the builders of this killing array back then. He is also one of the few people who can activate it again now. As soon as these words came out, everyone around was trembling in their hearts and showing panic on their faces. They are actually going to use the means they used to deal with the world-class beast to deal with Lin En. If this news spreads, the whole world will probably be shocked. Zhang Guo said solemnly, his existence has threatened the balance of all countries, because standing out from the crowd is a mistake. If you want to blame someone, you can only blame him for being too powerful. This world does not need an emperor who is high above everyone else. And the moment he finished speaking, the whole building rumbled and trembled instantly. The faces of the surrounding congressmen changed drastically in an instant. They had already had a vague premonition. He's coming. Zhang Guo suddenly raised his head, clenched his fists, and the blood in his body exploded instantly. And the next moment, they turned their heads and looked out the window. In the sky hundreds of meters high, they saw a figure breaking through the space. The moment he appeared, the whole city rumbled and trembled under his pressure. The supreme ruler of Zhuzhou. Lin En. The next moment, in the sky, Lin En stretched out his hand to their capital, and then raised his finger. In an instant, under the horrified gaze of everyone in the city, the 100-story building broke directly in the middle, and the upper part of the building turned into ashes in an instant. The rolling wind whistled. Zhang Guo stood on the half-building, looking at Lin En in the sky, and shouted, Lin En! You are here! Lin En hugged his shoulders, looked at him from a distance, and said indifferently, Since you are unwilling to surrender, then I have to kill you. Zhang Guo stared at him intently, and the breath emanating from Lin En made him tremble. It was not until they met face to face that he clearly felt Lin En's strength. It was like a Taishan mountain. Zhang Guo said fiercely, Lin En, you are indeed invincible, but you can't kill me. Lin En said indifferently, I came here to kill you, right? In an instant, Lin En took action. His patience had long been worn out. He didn't want to talk nonsense with this person anymore, so he directly suppressed him. Under the control of the law, Lin En was able to mobilize the will of law around him at will. With just a casual wave of his hand, the storm in the sky swept over in an instant. Zhangguo roared, urging his blood and energy to fight against it. The two powerful forces only touched each other slightly, and all the glass in the city was shattered at that moment. Everyone in the city looked at the sky in horror. The tall buildings were crumbling, the cars had been swept into the sky, and the whole city seemed to be shaking. Lin En, is this all you have? Zhangguo roared, and at that moment, he broke through Lin En's storm and appeared in front of Lin En across 100 meters in an instant. Boom! Lin En stretched out his hand and punched him. The air wave from the explosion directly caused the surrounding space to collapse. Everything within a radius of hundreds of meters turned into dust. It is conceivable how terrible the power of this punch is. And in the next moment, in the eyes of everyone in shock, Zhangguo vomited blood, and his body fell heavily from the sky hundreds of meters high like a cannonball. There was a loud bang. The sky was stained with blood, and Zhangguo stood up with difficulty, his eyes showing horror. Everyone who saw the scene was shocked. Master Zhangguo, you are suppressed in terms of strength. How is this possible? Isn't that Lin En a magician? How can his strength be so strong? Zhangguo's lips trembled, and he looked at his twisted right arm, and his heart trembled even more. He is a martial god. Although he does not have the dazzling offensive means of the magic god, his physical fitness and strength can be ranked among the best in the world. But just now, when he collided with his fist, he clearly felt that it was like an ordinary person's fist hitting an oncoming truck. The huge impact force even moved his internal organs. He had overestimated Lin En's strength as much as possible, but after contact, he found that he still underestimated him too much. Because he had already used all his strength in this attack. He raised his head, looked at Lin En tremblingly, and said, "What kind of monster are you?" Lin En looked at his undamaged fist and said, "It's useless, Zhangguo, I can control the laws, and the law of power is the earliest batch of laws I have mastered. In fact, you surprised me more, because so far, you are the only one who can survive the fist power under my blessing of the law of power." But, Lin En said slowly, "That's it?" He suddenly stretched out his hand to the entire Dongdu. Instantly, Zhangguo felt a palpitation. A huge sense of crisis from the heart, like a surging blood fountain, instantly swept his whole body. The next moment, he suddenly raised his head and looked at the sky. This look made his eyes instantly fall into great fear. The sky collapsed. In Dongdu, everyone stared at the sky in a daze. They simply couldn't describe the scene they saw at this moment in words. The sky is approaching. That's right, it was like the sky collapsed and was rapidly approaching them. And Chen Daoming, who was far away at the border of Kyushu, also felt this huge energy fluctuation in an instant. He subconsciously raised his head, and when he looked at it, he instantly took a breath of cold air. "Lin En, what kind of monster are you?" From his perspective, there was a huge depression in the atmosphere above the kingdom of the rising sun. If someone looked at the Earth from outer space at this moment, he would be able to clearly see that the atmosphere in the rising sun country seemed to have suddenly gained a huge mass, being pulled by the Earth's gravity and pouring down to the ground. And under the sky, it was really like the sky was falling. In that thought, he directly gave the atmosphere above the rising sun country absolute weight and mass. The whole sky was approaching. Zhangguo looked at the great power in fear, and his legs kept shaking. He had never seen anyone use such a terrifying method to fight the enemy. Could it be that he really wanted to destroy the entire rising sun country? But in the next moment, he suddenly saw that the sky with absolute mass suddenly turned over, and finally turned into a huge triangular prism, and the sharp corner locked him firmly. Gods above! Xuanhuan was completely panicked this time. He was not going to destroy the entire rising sun country, he was going to destroy him. Xuanhuan screamed in great fear. He wanted to escape, but in an instant, he was horrified to find that his body was actually locked in place. Space. The space around him was locked. His heart instantly fell into a huge abyss. He raised his head and looked at Lin An standing high in the sky. At this moment, he instantly understood. To be able to lock his space, he already had the strength to easily crush him. The reason why he used this entire sky to execute him. He wanted to establish his authority. He was killing for the people of the entire rising sun country to see. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 254. Let all those who are unwilling to surrender see their supreme ruler being crushed like this. At this moment, the fear that Lin An brought to him almost penetrated into his bones. Lin An. You will not die well, he roared. With no other choice, he suddenly raised his head and stretched out his hand to the entire sky. He wanted to resist the impact of the entire sky, he wanted to give it a try. But he still overestimated his strength. Boom! A huge roar. The weight of the entire sky gathered on him, and there was almost no hindrance, and Xuanhuan's body disappeared from people's sight. In an instant, the whole country was shocked. Amaterasu and Zosu, who had just broken through the air, happened to witness the scene. Their eyes trembled and their hearts trembled. Lin An, using the entire sky, executed their supreme ruler. And it was in their capital, in front of tens of millions of people in the royal city. At this moment, no one dared to shout, no one dared to say more, everyone was shocked. Lin An hugged his shoulders and looked down at the entire Dongdu, his voice was extremely cold. From now on, the Supreme Council of the Rising Sun country will be dissolved. I am your new ruler. I give you the power to rebel and fight against me. If you feel that you have the power to defeat me and take back your so-called freedom, then you can challenge me. But before you defeat me, you will become my vassal, a vassal of the Kyushu territory. In other words, from now on, your life no longer belongs to you. Your life and death will be decided by me. His voice rolled across the entire rising sun country, making everyone who heard it feel trembling. Even Zosu and Amaterasu were trembling. This is an absolute crushing of strength, this is a conquest of their entire rising sun country. Amaterasu and Zosu all knew that the situation was over. Lin An's eyes had told them that they either surrendered or died. Under the trembling gaze of everyone, after the death of Xuanhuan, Amaterasu and Zosu, who represented the highest power of the rising sun country, slowly knelt on one knee to Lin An. Yes, master, their voices trembled. They were unwilling, but they were powerless. Because this was a conquest that put a sword across the neck of their entire nation. The moment they knelt down, the hearts of millions of people in the entire East City were finally completely broken at that moment. One ruler was brutally killed, and two rulers chose to surrender. They had no choice at all. The kingdom of the sunrise surrenders to you. Millions of people in the entire East City knelt down to the sky, their voices trembling and desperate. Master! The trembling voices of millions of people in unison were extremely shocking. Even the top fighters of the Kyushu domain who were rushing to the kingdom of the sunrise far above the sea could clearly hear the news from the kingdom of the sunrise. They were startled, not knowing what happened. And the next moment, Lin An's voice came from the sky. Come to the kingdom of the sunrise, ready to take over this country, they have been conquered by me. In an instant, when they heard the meaning of that voice clearly, everyone present showed a look of astonishment. Lin An obviously did not return, and this voice was directly transmitted by Lin An using the law. What did Lord Lin En say? A magic god said blankly, I didn't hear it clearly. It seems to be. Another town general said blankly, the kingdom of the rising sun has been conquered. Instantly, the whole audience was in an uproar. More than half an hour later, when their army arrived at the port of the kingdom of the rising sun, they immediately saw that on the open space of the port, led by Amaterasu and Zosu, tens of thousands of high-level combat forces of the kingdom of the rising sun stood in neat rows on the open space of the port. And on the flagpole in the open space, there was no national flag of the kingdom of the rising sun. Instead, there was a national flag of the Kyushu region in the center, and a white flag fluttering on both sides of the flagpole. After seeing the two white flags flying in the wind, thousands of top combat forces in the Kyushu region were stunned. Lord Lin En, has the entire kingdom of the rising sun been conquered? A magic god murmured. They landed blankly, and now they still couldn't believe this fact. Because it was simply too absurd. Because Lin En had been resisting the kingdom of the sunrise for less than 2 hours. Under the gaze of all of them, Amaterasu and Zosu lowered their heads, holding the national flag and the ring of the supreme ruler, and said, "We are waiting for you here on the orders of Lord Lin En. All the combat forces above the Grand Master of the Kingdom of the Sunrise are here. We surrender to Mr. Lin En and are willing to accept the takeover of the Juzhu territory." All the top combat forces in the entire Juzhu territory were really stunned at this moment. They naturally knew the two people standing in front of them. The second supreme ruler of the Kingdom of the Sunrise, Amaterasu and Zosu. As world-class strongmen, their names resounded throughout the world. But at this moment, the two of them lowered their heads, humbly waiting for their occupation and disarmament. Lord Lin En. A magic god said sluggishly. You really deserve to be the supreme ruler of our Juzhu territory. Soon, the news of the surrender of the Kingdom of the Sunrise spread to the Juzhu territory. In an instant, this news broke out like thunder and dominated the headlines of all media in the entire Kyushu region. The entire Kyushu region was boiling. How long has it been since Lin En led the army to set out until now? Only a few hours. Who could have thought that in just a few hours, Lord Lin En conquered a world power? The rising sun country has surrendered. This is simply unimaginable. Lord Lin En is invincible. Long live Lord Lin En. We have Lord Lin En, who in this world can be an enemy of our Kyushu region. People were excited and extremely excited. Conquering a country is far more exciting than destroying a country. And the country conquered is a country with historical hatred with Kyushu region. Now, people can finally point to the country on the world map that looks like an earthworm and tell everyone seriously. This is a province in our Kyushu region. It's called the Rising Sun Province. You don't need to apply for a visa to go there in the future. At the same time, the high seas. Above the rolling sea, huge waves rolled, and several people wrapped in rolling streams of light stood above the sea level. They are all world-class masters. At a glance, there are more than 2 hands of world-class masters here. Although they are all world-class masters, from the position where they stand, they still have a gap in strength. The weak ones can only stand on the periphery, and the closer they go to the center, the stronger the world-class masters there are. And in the center of them, there stands a young man. He has blonde hair, and his fingers with golden rings slowly shake the half-glass of red wine in his hand. He is dressed very gorgeously, and his clothes are obviously different from those of the people around him. He seems to be a person who does not belong to this era. He said slowly, the kingdom of the rising sun has been conquered by him, which means that the warring states are dead. A woman opposite him bowed her head and saluted, saying, "Yes, not long ago, I sensed the space signal that he wanted to break through the space and transmit to this place, but obviously, he did not succeed, and the bait plan failed." The man said slowly, "Bait? For Lin En, there is no need for bait at all. As invincible as he is, I am afraid he has already felt the breath we exude, and he will definitely come. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xianyue. Chapter 255. The woman raised her head and looked at the man in front of her who was incompatible with this world with some fear and discomfort. He is the supreme ruler of the British Empire. Everyone calls him Kaidi. In fact, although he stole the show when he revived Linky 100 years ago, there has been very little news about him in the world in recent decades. He is not a low-key person, on the contrary, he is very high-key. And just when everyone was guessing that this man might be dead, he appeared again. And directly mobilized them, world-class experts from different countries, to jointly construct today's murderous situation against Lin En. But everyone around him felt a sense of discomfort from this man. Some kind of tremor from the soul. Just like the instinctive fear a rabbit feels when it encounters a goshawk. She still clearly remembered the intimidating power that Kaidi exuded when she wanted to refuse when he asked her to help him build this killing bureau. It was an indescribable eerie fear that she had never felt before in this world. It was as if a sticky, twisted monster with eyes and tentacles was squeezed into this gorgeous body. No matter how gorgeous it is, it can't hide the darkness. Is this man really Kaidi? Kaidi slowly raised his head and looked towards the 9 provinces territory, his eyes seemed to penetrate thousands of kilometers in an instant. He said slowly, "Lin, do you dare to fight?" In an instant, the surrounding color changed. Kaidi exuded a monstrous aura. That momentum shot straight into the sky, causing the white clouds thousands of miles above the sea to disappear in an instant. Everyone around him felt the cold evil, although they knew that this aura was not directed at them. But the coldness at that moment still made them feel scared from the bottom of their hearts. And almost at the same time, in the sea area thousands of miles east of the Kyushu territory, Lin stood above the sea level, looking out over the open sea. A moment later, white-haired Chen Daoming came from the Kyushu territory and instantly landed next to Lin En. Nowadays, Chen Daoming has become a demigod. It is impossible to imagine how terrifying his current strength is. Lin En, do you feel it? Chen Daoming slowly frowned and looked towards the high sea. Just now, a powerful aura came from that direction. Cold, evil, arrogant, and looking down on the world. It was like a challenge, an invitation. Lin En's eyes were calm. He stood with his hands behind his back, surrounded by strong wind and laws. Someone issued a challenge to me, Lin En said slowly. Just above the high seas, above a sea area called the Endless Realm. As soon as these words came out, Chen Daoming's expression changed instantly. Endless Realm. Lin En turned his head slightly and said, "What's wrong?" Chen Daoming frowned and said, "Lin, if this is really that place, listen to my advice. No matter what kind of provocation or invitation to fight, never respond." Lin En raised his head and said, "What do you know?" Chen Daoming took a deep breath. Of course he knew, because back then, the place where they hunted the world-class ferocious beast was the Endless Realm. He is one of the earliest world-class Dharma gods in the world. Decades ago, on behalf of the Kyushu territory, he and several other world-class experts participated in the hunting operation against the sky-swallowing giant beast. The brutality of that battle made him shudder even when he thought about it now. He is now a demigod, but if he is the only one to face the sky-swallowing beast again, he can feel that even now, he will definitely not be denied a good harvest. But back then, with the strength of 100 of them, the sky-shattering killing formation they jointly arranged killed the sky-swallowing giant beast. And that killing formation is still standing there so far. And in this world, the only one who can use the killing array is Emperor Kai of the British Empire. If he wanted to use that killing array to deal with Lin, Chen Daoming immediately told Lin En everything he knew. After hearing this, Lin En's face showed no signs of change. He slowly said, "Hunted and killed the world's #1 sky-devouring giant beast at that time? Where did that killing formation come from?" Chen Daoming frowned and said, I was just a participant back then, not a decision maker. I only knew that the killing array was a great killing weapon obtained by Emperor Kai from an unknown field. He once told us that this killing array only those who are demigod or above can barely drive it. Even if we have hundreds of world-class experts, there is a high chance of failure if they want to activate that killing array. Lin An narrowed his eyes and said, so terrifying. Chen Daoming said complicatedly, yes, we paid half the price of a strong man before we finally managed to activate the killing array. After the killing array was activated, even if it was as powerful as a sky-swallowing giant beast, there would be no room for resistance. So Lin, you can't accept this challenge, he must have set a trap and is waiting for you there. Lin turned and looked in the direction of the open sea. The overwhelming momentum was like ripples, rolling and spreading in the sky. That kind of momentum is clearly telling you, I am here, waiting for you. Whether you dare to come or not is your business. Lin An said slowly, I accept this letter of challenge. As soon as these words came out, Chen Daoming's face changed and he said, Lin An, you have to stay calm, don't be impulsive. Lin An said calmly, I am very calm. First, I am confident in my trump card. Second, only by defeating Kaidi can the pattern of this world change. I want to make Zhu domain surpass the world, and I also want to unify mankind in the shortest time. Winning this battle can speed up my pace. Chen Daoming's heart was fighting between man and God. He knew that Lin An was extremely determined. He also knew that Lin An's current vision had long transcended the struggle for power among humans, and his vision was looking to the future. He wanted to conquer all mankind and the world, just to allow himself to control the overall situation before the greater crisis in the future came. But Chen Daoming suddenly raised his head and said firmly, well, I will go with you. I am now a demigod and I can help you. Lin An shook his head and said deeply, no, there must be a real strong man in Zhu domain, because in this world, in addition to Kaidi, there are many strong men from many countries who are eyeing us covetously. If our battle is deadlocked, they will be the ones who will reap the benefits. Chen Daoming was about to speak, Lin An raised his head and said, I have made up my mind, you don't need to say more, if I really can't deal with the killing array, I can still open the Eye of Collapse, but you are different. If you are trapped in it, it would be fine if you can suppress the heroes, but once you are suppressed, the result will only be worse, and after I open the Eye of Collapse, once I can't control it, it will hurt you instead. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 256. Under the control of the law, no one knows his true strength. All I can say is that his lower limit is world-class, but his upper limit is terrifyingly high. Chen Daoming knew that Lin An had already made a decision, and he would never change the decision he made. But he was still very worried about Lin An's safety, because this time he was facing not only the killing formation, but also Kaidi. The man who, even though he was Chen Daoming, still felt depressed. Chen Daoming even once doubted whether that man had already become a demigod. Lin, how many times can you use your Benjian? Chen Daoming asked deeply, asking the question he was most worried about. He still remembered the terrifying destructive power when Lin's collapse eyes opened. With one look, he can instantly kill a world-class strong man. Such a powerful force cannot have no limit. Lin An said calmly, 5 times. After 5 times, I will start to lose control. After 10 times, I will definitely lose my mind. At most, 20 times, even now, my soul will be extinct. Chen Daoming took a breath of air conditioning. Enough. Enough. What he is most worried about now is whether the battle between Lin An and Kaidi will overwhelm the planet. Especially once Lin's Honkai eye is opened, the destructive power is devastating. Because now, on the eastern coast, the traces left by its collapse have not yet been repaired. Lin, if you really can't solve it, I will help you immediately, Chen Daoming said complicatedly. Lin nodded, but he didn't say anything. In an instant, divine light burst out, leaving only after images of his body. A few minutes later, the endless realm of the high seas. Kai Di was dressed in gorgeous clothes. He drank all the red wine in the glass in one gulp. Tentacles emerged from his sleeves and swallowed the wine glass in his hand bit by bit. Here we come. The corner of his mouth curled up, and there was no nervousness about the impending battle on his face. He looked up. And at the next moment, a sound explosion suddenly came from the sky. A figure suddenly appeared above the sea. The moment he appeared, strong winds were blowing in the hundreds of miles of sea area. Even the space was faintly unstable, and the laws of the entire sea area were in turmoil. Lin. Everyone present instantly became extremely alert and stared at him. Many people had clenched their fists nervously, and a slight cold sweat broke out on the backs of their necks. Even though Kai Di, the inhumanly powerful monster, was sitting behind them, they still didn't dare to relax in the face of Lin En. Because Lin is also a complete monster. Lin En hugged his shoulders with a calm expression and said, "It turns out that there are so many people waiting for me here, but it's good to deal with them all at once and save me from searching all over the world." Kaidi raised his head and smiled lightly, as in the legend, "You are indeed extremely arrogant, but you are indeed qualified to be arrogant. In this world, you are the most powerful human being I have ever seen, except for me." 1. His words are profound. Because he only limited the scope to humans in this world. Lin En said calmly, "Do you want to use that killing array to deal with me?" Kaidi smiled lightly and said, "But you're still here." Lin En slowly stretched out his hand, the lines of law lingering around him, and said, "Because I don't care." Kaidi narrowed his eyes and said, "You don't care. You are invincible, which makes me unable to bear to kill you. If you surrender, I am willing to conspire with you in big things. I know you know that great changes are coming. Not only the age of fairies, but even the giants of the era that have existed since ancient times will appear in this world. If you surrender to me, I will give you a seat in the future." Lin En said slowly, "I have never been inferior to others. There is only one king, and there can only be one. Your era has come to an end, and I am the only one in this era." Kaidi's eyes burst out with streaks of black light and said, "How ridiculous! The Dark Age is coming, and when the giant crocodiles of countless eras come, the world will be reshuffled, and you will become the king among the ants. This is where your vision ends." Lin En said calmly, "You know a lot, but I also know a lot. I can also tell you that I want to be the king among the ants, and I also want to stand on the eagle and be the king. What I want to be? It's the King of Kings." In an instant, Lin En's eyes burst out with dazzling purple light. He suddenly raised his hand, the whole sky roared loudly, the whole sea area was boiling, and countless roulette wheels gathered in his hands. At this moment, the color of the sky and the earth changed, and the sun and moon lost all light. The expressions of the people around him suddenly changed, and the power that Lin En exuded at this moment made them tremble. Even just touching it makes me feel like blood is about to burst out of my body. Kaidi suddenly raised his head, his expression suddenly serious, and he shouted, "What a king of kings! If you can step on my head and go up against the sky, I will admit that you are invincible. If you die here today, then I will kill you throughout the 9 provinces." He roared, and in an instant, from his feet, the entire sea area seemed to be spread with blood and turned red. The scarlet color spread thousands of miles, almost dyeing the entire sea red. At the same time, under his feet, a killing array slowly emerged. The moment the killing array emerged, ghosts cried, and wolves howled in the entire sea area, and heaven and earth wailed. The faces of the world-class masters around them changed drastically. Decades ago, to open this killing array, at least 100 of them had to work together. But at this moment, only Kaidi could open the array. How terrifying his current strength has become can no longer be described in words. The next moment, Lin En mobilized the laws of the sky and collided with the array driven by Kaidi. Boom! This collision caused huge waves in hundreds of thousands of miles of sea at the same time. Even on the other side of the earth, the huge shock could be clearly felt. At the same time, on the coast of the land of the rising sun, the coast of Kyushu, and the coast of Britain, thousands of meters high waves rolled over because of this huge collision. The top combat forces of various countries changed their faces and tried their best to resist. What on earth happened? How could such a tsunami and earthquake be caused? Someone is fighting on the high seas. Rumor has it that Kaidi of the British Empire is fighting with Lin En, the supreme ruler of the Kyushu domain. How is this possible? If this is true, then the intensity of this battle will be unimaginable. All the powerful people in seclusion in the world have awakened. Even thousands of miles away, tens of thousands of miles away, they can clearly feel the terrible power emanating from the high seas. They looked solemn and trembled in their hearts. No one dared to watch the battle at close range. This kind of battle that can make the entire planet tremble will only lead to death if you get close. On the high seas, a huge black hole stretching for hundreds of kilometers suddenly appeared. Countless seawater was squeezed in all directions in this blow, and even a huge hole appeared in the deep seabed. From this, we can imagine how terrible the scale of this battle is. The world-class magic gods around were pale, and they actually found that they could not participate at all. This is a battle between true kings, and they can only look up. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 257. In the sky, Kaidi suddenly raised his head, his eyes torn, and said, "Lin En, you are really terrible. You can actually take the full force of this blood prison killing array. I originally thought that after absorbing the sky-devouring beast and after decades of nurturing, this array is already invincible. It seems that I underestimated you too much." In the sky outside, half of Lin En's body collapsed, and the sky was stained with blood. But there was no movement on his face. He was very calm, and the will of life was quickly recovering his injuries. Just now, he used the law as a thread to weave a huge net that reached the sky and hit the blood array. This attack was originally a test of reality. This attack also caused the law net he wove to collapse and injured him. But he already had a general understanding of the strength of this blood array. In an instant, Lin En's eyes were like lightning. He suddenly stretched out his hand, and the will of law in his hand instantly swept across the entire sea area. Your blood formation is very strong, but it is a minor path after all. Under the law, everyone is an ant, and I am the law. Instantly, a dazzling light burst out from his eyes. Amidst the extremely shocked eyes of the crowd, he raised the sea of thousands of kilometers in radius, transformed into a Dharma image, and fought with Kaidi. This time, the sea area he raised was far larger than the one in the kingdom of the sunrise. This battle has long been beyond everyone's imagination. Kaidi roared, and he moved as he wished. The inscriptions of the magic formation were controlled to the extreme by him. The blood formation also turned into a 10,000-meter giant statue, fighting with Lin En. This battle was so fierce that the sky was dark and the earth was cracked. Even from tens of thousands of miles away, the scene of their battle could be clearly seen. This will be a bloody battle. A battle that will definitely not be decided in a short time. On the empty sea, Lin En stood there like a god. The law of all things. What is the law of all things? That is to truly keep one's word and truly be able to manipulate everything in this world at will and fight. There was a loud bang. The giant formed by the entire sea broke under the attack of the blood formation. Kaidi's eyes were bloodshot, and he roared to the sky. Lin En. What do you have to fight me with? Lin En suddenly raised his hands, and his voice was like rolling thunder. I use this world. Wind. With his roar, countless winds in the world heard his call. They kept accelerating and gathering, and finally turned into a storm stretching for thousands of kilometers on this high seas. Countless seawater was swept up to the sky, and people could clearly see through satellites that the typhoon was so huge that it was unimaginable on the high seas. Everyone was terrified. Everyone trembled uncontrollably. What kind of monsters are they? Will this battle cause the planet to collapse? God bless us. Under that power, humans are as small as ants. And it is these two ant-like humans who hold this supreme power. This battle lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. The killing caused the wind to collapse and the continent to shift. These 3 days were like a doomsday, and every corner of the planet was shaking and trembling. After the wind was suppressed, Lin En tore the sky directly and came to the largest desert on Earth, allowing millions of square kilometers of sand and stone to be controlled by him. After the sand and stone were suppressed, he rushed into the largest volcano group on Earth, causing the volcano to erupt, and the billowing smoke covered the sky. Their mental power seemed endless. Boom! With a loud bang, the thunder and lightning summoned by Lin En were dispersed by the blood array controlled by Kaidi. Kaidi's face was full of ferocity, and he said to Lin En, "It seems that you have exhausted all your means. The law is just like this." The next moment, in the high sky, the strong wind blew through Lin En's black hair. He said slowly, "I used the basic elements that make up this world to fight you one by one. You let me gain a lot in the battle. If you don't meet someone who can really match you, you can't go further, so I am very grateful to you." Instantly, Kaidi's face changed drastically. "What did you say?" In the past few days of fighting, they fought until the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked, and the sun and the moon fell. But he just couldn't kill Lin En. He knew that Lin En had a trump card in his hand, and Lin En's words made him vaguely guess a terrible possibility. He was practicing with himself. He was honing himself in the battle with himself. And at that moment, he suddenly felt a palpitation and a terrible fluctuation from Lin En's body. The moment the fluctuation came, he actually broke out in a cold sweat on his back. His face changed drastically, and he suddenly raised his head and said, "That is." As he watched, a huge wheel slowly emerged on Lin En's chest. It was a very eerie wheel, different from any wheel of life he had ever seen. When facing that wheel, he actually felt like he was facing the entire sky. In the intense divine light, Lin En slowly said, "This is the will of heaven, the avenue of the heavens, and the carrier of all laws. For so long, I used my body as a seed to engrave the laws, but there was only its form, not its substance. It was not until my 3,000 years of dream that I realized that I was wrong." He suddenly flew high into the sky, and his expression became extremely cold at that moment. Those eyes, at that moment, completely changed. They were cold and indifferent, and they looked down on everything. They were no longer a pair of eyes that humans should have. Those eyes seemed to be the entire sky. Kaidi also felt a suppression from his soul the moment he came into contact with those eyes. His face changed drastically, his eyes trembled, and he said, "Heaven, Deo." "That's right." At this moment, Lin En gave him the feeling that he was the real Heaven's Deo, without any emotion, without any will, looking down on the earth, and ignoring the reincarnation of heaven and earth. Lin En said indifferently, "Before my big dream, I was once controlled by murderous intent and indifference. I always thought that I lost my original intention because of the rapid increase in strength, but later I found out that I was affected by the heaven's will in my body. It was the heaven's will that affected me and made me gradually approach the heaven's Dao. Lin An stretched out his hand, and there was a little light between his fingers. Indistinctly, his body became translucent and extremely ethereal. It was as if he was about to merge with the world at any time, and become the great will in the dark at any time. The changes he made Kaidi tremble in his heart. He felt fear. Feeling panic. Even the blood array he controlled was trembling. Lin An said indifferently, if I hadn't discovered it in time, then the future would either become a new heavenly Dao or merge with the current heavenly Dao. Now, I have finally found a way to control the power of heavenly Dao to spread in my body, and I have also found a way to continue to engrave the law without being affected by heavenly Dao. The wind blew his hair, and his body became more and more transparent. In an instant, at that moment, Kaidi felt a palpitation. His eyes instantly showed a look of horror and fear. Even this huge suppression made him subconsciously take a step back. If it was just because of the heavenly Dao momentum on Lin An just now, then now it is a real threat of death. That is. He trembled. Under his gaze, the deepest part of Lin An's right eye filled with divine light. Gurgling. It was as if something was climbing, or as if someone dropped a drop of ink into the clear river water, which quickly spread. At that moment, his right eye was completely filled with darkness. It was like an abyss. An abyss is staring at you. And around that dark abyss, unstable vibrations continued to grow, vibrations from space and time. That was the eye of collapse. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 258. This is Lin An's real trump card, the trump card that killed 3 world-class experts with just one look. Lin An slowly stretched out his hand, touched his right eye, and said, the law of heaven wants to assimilate me, so I will use the eye of Honkai impact to prevent this assimilation. In fact, I should have thought a long time ago that the eye of law is the real what belongs to me will not harm me, it will only help me. What really affects my mind is the heavenly will that I copied. The birth of the eye of Honkai impact may also be due to my excessive use of the law. The eye of law sensed the abnormal movement of the heavenly will in the body, and it was a coping method. All of this was to allow me to form a new method in the body. A delicate balance, like now. Lin An turned around and looked at Kai Di with one black and one purple pupils. One represents creation and the other represents destruction. At this moment, Kai Di felt a tremor from the depths of his soul, a suppressing coldness, and a fear that made him want to surrender. It was only after Lin An had the big dream that she slowly realized the connection. Because he used the Honkai eye twice, both times when he was emotionally excited, mentally unstable, and overusing the law, when his soul was at its weakest. This was the time when it was easiest for the breath of heaven to invade. Once the heavenly aura changes, it will immediately trigger the eye of collapse. Everything is so simple. But now, he can control these 2 powers at any time. In these 3 days, Lin An used all the elemental laws that constitute the foundation of the world to the extreme. He used Kaidi as a whetstone to continuously improve his control over the elemental laws. It was not until this moment that Lin An truly created a model of heaven and the world in his body. This moment is truly, I am the law. For a moment, Kai Di was horrified to see that the whole world lit up with countless lines. They are densely woven into the network of the entire world, and they are the power of laws throughout the world. At that moment, all the elemental laws of the world converged on Lin An. They were finally completely connected to Lin and became Lin's hands and feet. It was at this moment that Lin An truly became the controller of the elemental laws of this world for the first time. It's as natural as breathing. What the hell are you? Kai Di retreated tremblingly, and suddenly, he looked up to the sky and roared. In addition to his roar, his voice was also accompanied by an extremely cold howl. Lin An said calmly, maybe I should ask you this question. Lin An said calmly, Perhaps I should ask you this question, what are you? A monster living in this little body. In an instant, Kaidi's expression changed drastically. In the gaze of Lin An's eye of law, Lin An had already seen his whole body extremely thoroughly. Kaidi is inhuman. His current appearance is just a shell. Under this shell, there is some twisted and terrifying truth hidden. Kaidi's face instantly became extremely gloomy. You. What did you see? There was a strong hint of menace and ferocity in his voice. Lin An said lightly, I really want to know if you are still a human being and where did you come into contact with that kind of monster? Do you want to reveal your true identity yourself, or do you want me to help you? In an instant, Kaidi's expression changed drastically. He roared, controlled the blood formation and launched an extreme attack towards Lin An. Lin. Die. Lin An's eyes suddenly narrowed and he said, do you really think I don't have a way to deal with you? But at that moment, Lin An suddenly raised his head, and in his eyes, the dark and disintegrating light flashed instantly. And at the next moment, in the midst of Kaidi's horrified eyes, a gaze that destroyed the world came. The thousands of miles of blood formation under his control actually shattered like glass the moment it came into contact with that gaze. Eye of collapse, he looked horrified. And at the next moment, during the few tenths of a second when he was lost in thought, suddenly, he felt a strong wind coming. The moment he turned around, a fist struck his face. Boom! His body was instantly blasted 100,000 meters by Lin An's punch. The power of this punch, coupled with the blessing of the will of power, was too terrifying to imagine. Lin An slowly moved his wrist and said calmly, let me see your true body. 100,000 meters away. Countless blood array fragments fell. Kaidi staggered to his feet, and at this moment, there was a hole where he was punched in the face by Lin An. It's like the wound left when glass breaks. His face was even covered with dense cracks. And at the next moment, along with his roar, a huge black tentacle burst out from his cheek. Under Lin An's indifferent gaze, Kaidi's entire body underwent earth-shaking changes. Tentacles shot out from his body one after another. Twisting, squeezing, like something is trying desperately to get out. Seeing this scene, the expressions of the dozen or so world-class experts suddenly changed. That's what. At this moment, they felt the huge trembling and coldness more clearly. They had felt the extremely evil aura from Kaidi before. In just a few seconds, a terrifying tentacled creature with a body that was almost several kilometers in size appeared above the sea. It has no shape, or in other words, words cannot describe its true appearance. And just above the body of the indescribable monster, countless pairs of huge pupils slowly opened. No one could imagine how such a huge monster could live in that small body. Lin An said calmly, is this the real you? The monster let out a scream. His voice had completely changed, becoming hoarse and repetitive, filled with endless resentment. Lin. How dare you let me show such an ugly appearance, I will definitely kill you. Even if you are completely swallowed by the darkness, I will definitely kill you. Lin An said calmly, I'm confused about what you are, or rather, which era you are a product of. Kaidi said ferociously, do you think I am a monster? Do you think I am an alien in this form? Let me tell you, no matter what I become, I am still a human being, and I am based on the human race. In an instant, he roared and countless tentacles shot towards Lin An. After regaining his true form, his speed was unimaginable. Each of his tentacles can tear the sky apart, and every attack makes the earth tremble. And Lin An was strolling through his attacks, as if he was in a deserted area. After entering the state of heaven, Lin An was one step away from integrating with the world. In this state, the whole world was his hands and feet. Lin An said indifferently, do you think you are still a human being? You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. I can see the laws of things. Author, Xuanhuan. Chapter 259. Kaidi roared, I am Kaidi, the strongest person in human history. No one can deny this. He attacked crazily, almost falling into madness, and the entire sea area was stirred by him. He roared, do you want to know? Do you want to know why I am like this? Okay. Then I will tell you. Tell you the so-called truth of this world. Our decadent era has reached the end of the world. The world is about to collapse. The giant crocodiles that have been sleeping in countless eras since ancient times will wake up here. Do you really think that all creatures are kind to our world? More than 10 years ago, I had a glimpse of the truth. The eternal old gods are about to awaken. They will transform all creatures in this world into my appearance, including your body and your will, so that you will be enveloped in evil forever. He roared, and death rays shot out from the countless eyeballs all over his body. The whole sea was boiling. But this still couldn't touch Lin's hair. Kaidi became more and more extreme. He roared and stirred up the entire sea area. Boom! A loud bang. Lin An killed the countless tentacles with one punch. He raised his head suddenly, his eyes suddenly cold. Of course he remembered the insect mother he killed during the insect swarm incident. A few months ago, he asked Bai Qi to help her investigate this matter. Later, he also tried to contact Bai Qi, but there was no news from her at all. He didn't know what happened to Bai Qi. But he vaguely felt that Bai Qi must have encountered something difficult to solve, which made her unable to escape. Otherwise, even if she couldn't contact him, she would definitely leave a message in Jianghai City. But no. It was like she disappeared out of thin air. After he unified the world, he personally went to explore the mystery of the old god and look for Bai Qi. Lin An looked at Kaidi indifferently and said, it seems that you still maintain the will as a human being. That's very good. I thank you very much for telling me the information about the old gods, but I don't have that much time to listen to you. Tell me, after killing you, I will personally search for it from your soul. Kaidi roared, then let's see if you have this ability. Lin suddenly raised his head and said, very good. For a moment, Lin An's eyes burst out with dazzling light. He suddenly stretched out his hand in the direction of Kaidi, and then shook it hard. There was a click. The location of Kaidi's huge body was instantly like a broken mirror, with countless cracks split open. This is... Kaidi said dully. The surrounding was broken. But what is broken is not the space, but time. A gust of wind blew Lin An's hair, and he said slowly, since I have decided to keep your soul, I will not use the Honkai Eye. You should also feel lucky that even after death, can still leave some evidence of your existence. In an instant, Lin An raised his head. From the perspective of the Eye of Law, everything around Kaidi changed. Lin used the highest level law will on him. Will of time. At that moment, Lin An directly broke the long flow of time spreading from him to the distant future. He captured Kaidi directly from the long river of time and fixed it at this moment. From the perspective of the Eye of Law, a huge clock appeared on Kaidi's back. And the pointer that has been moving slowly towards the future becomes slower and slower, and finally stops completely. Everything in Kaidi fell into silence. And at the next moment, the pointer turned counterclockwise. Click. Click. One moment after another, Kaidi's entire time wheel slowly fluctuated toward his past. But Lin An still stood there, staring at him motionless. What he wanted to do was to make Kaidi's body go backwards. He wants to witness his mutation process with his own eyes and be prepared to fight against the old gods. He is gathering information. That clock spinning counterclockwise is going faster and faster and faster. And Kaidi's body has also undergone tremendous changes. The tentacles on his body are constantly shrinking, and his twisted body structure is constantly regressing in reverse. Finally, Kaidi's body returned to its human state. And Lin En also witnessed the entire process of his mutation. The next moment, a piece of dark flesh was separated from Kaidi's chest. And at that moment, Kaidi's body no longer had that terrifying cold aura. Lin En instantly stretched out his hand and used the will of space to directly imprison the piece of flesh and blood. This piece of flesh and blood should be the culprit who infected Kaidi. A piece of flesh and blood from an old god. Even though it was imprisoned by Lin En, the piece of flesh and blood was still struggling, screaming, and even growing eyes and tentacles, which was extremely weird. Lin En said calmly, "That's it?" The next moment, Kaidi woke up directly from the wheel of time. In an instant, his body changed, and a look of extreme astonishment appeared on his face. "What's going on? What happened?" During the process of going back in time, his thinking had completely stopped, and he had no idea what happened to him. Under Lin En's deliberate control, the wheel of time did not rewind his memory. Instead, it completely retraced their bodies back to before he was infected. Lin En said lightly, "This should be the culprit that turned you into that monster, right?" Lin En raised his finger slightly, and the imprisoned flesh and blood slowly emerged. Kaidi saw the scene and instantly showed an extremely terrified expression. Over the past 10 years, he has been tortured by this thing and was covered with wounds. If it weren't for his strong will, he would have gone crazy long ago. He suddenly realized something and subconsciously touched his body. He said dully, "I changed back." He raised his head and looked at Lin En. At this moment, his eyes looking at Lin En changed dramatically. Fear. Awe. "What did you do to me?" he trembled. Lin En said lightly, "I retraced your time and made you return to before you were infected." In an instant, Kaidi's mind was blank, his lips were trembling, and his eyes were shaking. Going back, time. How is this possible? How can time be controlled by humans? But when he looked at the changes in his body, he found that his strength had returned to more than 10 years ago. Time was really going back. He was so excited. That is to say, he got rid of the entanglement of darkness and the ancient gods. That is to say, he can finally continue to live in this world with a human body. He suddenly raised his head, looked at Lin En, and said excitedly, "Lin En, maybe." Puff. A sound of breaking through the air. His pupils suddenly expanded, and he stood there sluggishly. A bloody hole had been pierced on his forehead. Lin En's emotionless voice came. "Do you want to be grateful? Or do you want to tell me that you have regained your life? Or let me give you a chance to start over? I'm sorry, I'm not a saint." Above the endless sea, Kaidi's body suddenly fell to the ground and hit the sea surface. The wind blew up Lin En's clothes. He was as indifferent as the way of heaven. I can see the laws of things. Author, Yitiao Xuanhuan. Chapter 260. This scene was also witnessed by the dozen world-class strongmen who survived the war. They trembled as they looked at the body of Kaidi, which was suspended upright on the sea level. Kaidi was dead. They remembered the twisted monster that had just climbed out of Kaidi's body. Even now, they felt a wave of coldness. But even such a terrifying monster did not go through around in Lin En's hands. They raised their heads and looked at the man who was suspended in the sky and whose body had almost merged with the world. Lin En. Even Kaidi was not his opponent. He was now the most powerful man in human society. The next moment, Lin En turned his head and looked at them. They instantly came into contact with Lin En's indifferent eyes, which frightened them so much that their souls almost collapsed. Lin En said indifferently, "What about you?" They felt trembling. The dozen world-class strongmen had almost no hesitation. They immediately knelt on one knee to Lin En and offered their loyalty. "We are willing to submit to you. Even Kaidi is not Lin's opponent. What are they? Lin looked at them calmly, making them tremble in their hearts, and cold sweat wet their collars along their necks. If Lin wanted to kill them, they would never be his opponents. They could only be slaughtered. Lin said nothing, and a few minutes later, he turned and flew into the sky, no longer paying attention. The dozen world-class strong men immediately felt exhausted and their bodies were wet. Humanity is about to usher in a new era. They looked at the sky tremblingly. Almost at the same time, in the capital of the British Empire. In the Supreme Council, Britain's top combat power and national parliamentarians all gathered together. They were all anxiously waiting for news of the war. Kaidi and Lin had been fighting on the Pacific Ocean for 3 days and 3 nights. No one knew who would win in the end. If Kaidi wins, their British Empire will definitely be able to take this opportunity to become the real world hegemon. But if Lin En wins, the entire world order will be rewritten. The world will usher in a major reshuffle. How long has it been since we heard the news? A congressman was anxious. Another world-class god of magic in the British Empire said solemnly. It's meaningless to say these things. We just need to firmly believe that Kaidi will definitely win. They are full of confidence in Kaidi, but at the same time, they are also very nervous. Because this is the only opponent who has fought with Kaidi for so long in decades and has not been solved. And at this moment, suddenly, the world-class event felt a huge wave coming from the outside world. He immediately felt it, and his eyes showed ecstasy. I just felt that someone was tearing the space and coming towards us. The people around immediately stood up, opened their eyes wide, and said, "Is it Kaidi?" The world-class god of magic clenched his fist and said, "It must be Kaidi, he must have come back after killing Lin En. Let's go outside to greet him." Everyone was ecstatic. They immediately rushed out of the door and rushed to the rooftop of the capital to greet Kaidi. They came to the rooftop and looked up at the sky in the strong wind. And the next moment, the space above the sky suddenly fluctuated violently. "Kaidi!" they shouted loudly. With a click, the space was torn apart. The next moment, dark clouds surged above the sky, and a figure appeared 1,000 meters above the sky. But after seeing that figure, the expressions on their faces froze in an instant. Because that person was not Kaidi at all. Lin En, the world-class magic god, subconsciously took a step back, with a look of shock in his eyes. That's right. The person in the sky was Lin En, who was dressed in a white robe, with a cold face, standing there, looking down at them. "How did you appear here? What happened to Kaidi?" The world-class magic god raised his head, roared, and his eyes were about to burst. Lin En raised his finger slightly, and the space broke in an instant. Kaidi's body fell from the high sky and fell heavily on the rooftop. The faces of the people around changed drastically. They looked at the broken body, and Kaidi's pupils stared at them, making them feel trembling. "You killed Kaidi." The world-class god of law's brain banged loudly, and the whole person collapsed to the ground. The other council members were all pale. Kaidi was the most powerful person in their Britain, and might even be the most powerful human in the world. Now, Kaidi is dead. They lost. Lin En stood in the sky, overlooking the entire land, and he said indifferently, "Kaidi is dead. From now on, the British Empire will be officially included in my rule. Do you have any objections?" The world-class god of law stood up suddenly, looked at Lin En fiercely, and roared. "I have." A sound of sword. A white sword blade instantly flew from the distant sky, and in the horrified eyes of everyone, it instantly pierced the chest of the world-class god of law. The world-class god of law trembled and lowered his head, looking at the huge blood hole on his chest, and fell heavily to the ground. In an instant, the whole audience trembled. Lin En said indifferently, "Who has any objections?" Everyone present trembled and dared not say a word. If they had any objections, they would die, so who would dare to have any objections? The next moment, the remaining parliamentarians knelt down tremblingly, bent down to Lin En, and trembled. The British Empire is willing to submit to you. Lin En said nothing, and the expression on his face was calm from beginning to end. The next moment, he flew to an altitude of tens of thousands of meters. In his eyes, the entire British Empire was under his gaze. His voice, under the blessing of the law, instantly spread throughout the world. I am Lin En. Kaidi has been killed by me. From now on, the British Empire will become a vassal of my Zhuzhou territory. I will now start a dialogue with all the countries in the world. I will give you 1 day to issue a statement of surrender to Zhuzhou territory and disarm your country, and let Zhuzhou territory take over. 1 day later, I will attack all countries that have not issued a statement. If you are willing to fight me, I will meet your demands. Lin En's voice rolled to the whole world. People in Zhuzhou territory, the kingdom of the rising sun, Britain, and hundreds of countries in the world, big and small, all heard this voice. All people raised their heads and looked at the sky with trembling eyes. Except for Zhuzhou territory, almost all countries fell into panic. After Lin En finished speaking, he instantly tore open the space and came to the center of the Pacific Ocean. The dozen world-class strongmen saw Lin En coming back again, and they all trembled, immediately knelt on one knee, and said, "Master,